Our next reader, another delightful surprise that I was not aware of. Pablo!
My name is John J. Pershing. You may remember me a little bit better as General Blackjack Pershing of that old war, the Great War. I'm really proud to tell you that I'm from the state of Missouri, and I am the highest ranking general in American military history. How many of you knew that? One. Huge cash prize. Well, it certainly is a delight that I was awakened by the spirit of George Washington, the father of our country, and dusted me off. And he said, Pershing, Pershing, get yourself down to Sedalia. There's some folks on a little Halloween message from you. Things that happened so long ago. Well, in all of my 6 stars, you still don't outrank the father of our country. When the father of our country says, Pershing, go to Missouri, Pershing goes to Missouri, period. So here I am, under orders from a very high authority. Well, on my way here, I wanted to catch up since 1947, my death on the news, and somebody told me that there was somebody had put a statue of me, in the Missouri State Capitol building. Yes, there is. And also of Captain Truman. He was under my command in that old war. He and I were the best of buddies. And he was a Democrat and I was a Republican. We didn't care. We were Americans back then. Indeed, we were. Then somebody said there's also a bust there of a fellow by the name of Limbaugh, and she explained all about Limbaugh. And no, move our statues, at least those two, please. We are Americans. Well, I wanted you to know that I also am from Laclede, Missouri. A little bitty town. Oh, a little town, and I graduated from high school. I really did, and very few people did that back then. I graduated from high school, and I took care of 2 schools I taught, and I did maintenance at a white school and a black school. I got to know them really, really well. I wondered why they were so separate. Why? And that had quite an impact on me later on. In 1886, I graduated from West Point. You may have heard of it. West Point. And I went on to have a military career. I'll tell you just a little quickie as I lead into the big one. You've heard of San Juan Hill in Cuba. You've heard of the Rough Riders, Teddy Roosevelt, up that hill. It wasn't just one group. It wasn't just the Rough Riders that awful day against the Spaniards, and they were tough. It was 2, and I was with the other one. The 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers, and both units side by side up that hill, and the death was hard to count, and we finally made it to the top. Who got the credit? The Rough Riders. I was with the 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers, and I bet you never knew it until now. My experiences went on, one right after another, and I learned about war, and who hates war more than a general who has been in it. And then, August 1914, the wisdom of the German command thought what they most needed to do was to invade France. Great idea. Wasn't it a great idea? They invaded France with the idea that the Germans would conquer France in 6 weeks. It didn't happen because, you see, the German command forgot something. They forgot that the French really didn't want to be invaded by anybody. It wasn't long before both sides degenerated into trenches that flowed red in northeast France. And here I was back home in Missouri, and in Washington, and back to Missouri, and then back to Washington, and here and there. All of my fellow officers and I were hearing the reports from the battlefields and how the earth shook from Holland to Bulgaria and on and on and on. And we were astounded at the poor judgment, the poor tactical judgment, the tactics of the French High Command. They sent their poilus those brave French boys, lines after lines after lines after lines after lines after lines, right down the muzzles of those German Maxim machine guns. And what did they do for the next battle? They did the same thing again, and the same thing again, and the same thing again. And my comrades back home and in the States, we were astounded that they would do such a thing. And by 1917, the French had lost a generation of their men. Can you imagine such a thing? Then in that same year, it became clear that we, back home in prosperous America, neutral America, would not be able to stay out of that war. It was not a war of choice. It was a war that was crammed down our throats. And I felt that finger tapping me on the shoulder. President Wilson said, "Pershing, take us to war." The last thing that any of us wanted to hear. Well, it wasn't long before I was in France there. I was in France there with 2 million American doughboys, and the Germans were all but laughing at them. Oh, those Americans, doughboys they called them. Oh, those Americans coming from the land of plenty, they can't fight. We're Germans. And then came the Battle of Belleau Wood, and those doughboys jumped on the Germans, the best unit they had, and tore them to pieces. The war still was. It dragged on. And every battle of any significance that we stepped into, we left better educated German soldiers behind. And then came the largest battle in American military history to that point. Late September 1918, the Battle of the Meuse Argonne. And it wasn't over quickly. Our boys stepped out of those trenches that morning. It was cool and quiet. And then in a moment, it was not quiet. And they died on top of each other. And every line came right after them and simply stepped over their comrades again and again and another one. And they wouldn't put up with it anymore. Not going to allow this war to drag on and on and on. And all through October, there were victories and defeats, and then victories and defeats. And then early November 1918, we heard that the Germans wanted to talk. Talk to our enemies. Yes, talk to our enemies. We have some things to say to them. Like, why? Why? Well, I remember what I felt when I first saw the group of negotiators in German uniforms on our lines that they were headed to the conference room. It was a railroad car. November 1918. As I saw those men walk by, I watched them like this. And I didn't see Huns. I didn't see monsters. I saw fathers and grandfathers just wanted it over with. Like all of us did. They just wanted it over with. And in one of their eyes, I stared so deeply and deep into those German eyes. I saw tables. I saw millions of tables all over the world. All of them surrounded by family members and loved ones, and at every single table there was one empty chair. And all of them seemed like in a kind of a unison, a moaning unison. Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, let him be okay. Send him home okay. Let him be okay. And for millions of them, he was not okay. And then came the word, after a few days of negotiations, General Pershing, sir, I think we can get an armistice. An armistice. Armistice. In my conversations with the president, I said, "Sir, President Wilson, sir, do you know what an armistice is? It is nothing more than a glorified ceasefire that will send home thousands of German boys with their rifles on their shoulders, convinced that they had not yet lost the war. And in a sense, they would be right. Give me 5 days, sir. And I'll stop this, and it'll never happen again. I fear there may be among those Germans another bellicose fiend who will grab that ugly saber of war and start it all over again. That's exactly. Well, as the negotiations were going on into 1919 in Versailles, I, of course, was not invited, and that was appropriate. I was a military man, not a diplomat. And I still had 2 million doughboys there on the front after the 11th hour, the 11th day, 11th month, when it had all stopped. 2 million doughboys needed to go home, those who were still alive. And I asked my driver one day to take me someplace north. I was just gonna take a day off. And we drove north and north. I could see the debris along the sides of the road. Then I assumed that we were in Belgium. And I said, stop driving. All day we had driven, now the sun was setting. Looking as orange and violent as the blasts of the cannons, and I stepped out into the news. I said, wait here, driver. And I walked on to that hitherto untouched battlefield. And it was strewn with broken trees and broken equipment and broken hearts everywhere I went. And the odor of death was still. And I walked on, and the sun slipped lower. Then under my feet I felt a strange vibration under my feet. And I stopped. Vibrations did not stop under my feet. I had felt that from the cannons, but there were no cannons. I looked from side to side, and then I heard a moaning of unison voices under my feet. Unison young men's voices under my feet. And they said in unison, General Pershing, sir, you know we're here. You know where you are. And you know that it can't be allowed to happen again. For you are now in Flanders fields, where the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row. And in the skies, look up, General Pershing, sir. In the skies, the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard among those who lie beneath your feet. For you say, sir, we are the dead. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw a sunset glow. Loved and were loved, but now we lie beneath your feet, General Pershing, sir. We'll go on. When will it stop? After Normandy? After Pork Chop Hill? After Fallujah? When, sir? When will we ever learn? Thank
You may be leaving for now, but the nightmares will return.